4 seconds.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I think we can start so we can finish on time. Good morning to everyone here in this room. Thank you so much for joining us. My name's Shuwei, and we are here today to talk about the lessons from applying AI in small newsrooms and what we learnt from the AI in Journalism Challenge. So I'll start with a very brief introduction of sort of why we did this crazy thing before handing over to the other panelists to explain in a little bit more in detail and put this all in context. So I work for the Open Society Foundations, which is a global philanthropic network, and our mission is really to build vibrant, tolerant societies where power can be held to account. And one area of that is around trying to leverage and build media and newsrooms for the next information ecosystem. So why did we go into AI, and why did we want to do a challenge around AI? Well, between David and I, we've known each other for quite a long time, and we've been working in sort of AI and in newsrooms for about 10 years or more. But it was November 2022, ChatGPT had just been released with explosive results. And it became very soon very clear to us that we were entering into a new era of AI in newsrooms, one that required much less technical capacity, one that required much less skill, and one that sort of had very, very low barriers to entry. And I remember we met February 2023. I was late to meet you at the British Library. I got on a bus in London, and teenagers on the bus were using ChatGPT very loudly and with much effervescence. And that was the moment where I think it really became clear in my mind, at least, that this was a thing, that this was a completely accessible technology that would enable a huge transformational change. So fast forward to June 2023, in 3 or 4 months, we decided to design an accelerator program which really aimed at this new era of AI in small newsrooms. One that was focused around the very low barriers to entry and that really advantaged small newsrooms. We focused this accelerator program, which we have written a report about and it is available online, around a learn by doing model. We opened it up to newsrooms with the criteria of anyone can apply for this as long as you have less than 30 people in your newsroom altogether. And we really tried to look for participants and applications from outside of the UK, the US, and Western Europe, seeing that we had seen a very huge potential for newsrooms outside of these economies to leapfrog. So if you could just jump to the next slide. Thank you. We had 113 applications. It was a very small cohort because we did this in, I think, 2 weeks and had a very quick turnaround. In the end, we picked 12 with using an external panel. And then in the end, we had 5 finalists. The details of this are not as interesting as what the panelists will talk about, and it's all available in the report. One last really key thing to say. What did we really want out of this, right? The thing that we didn't want to do was to focus this challenge on sort of making incremental change. We knew that this tool was absolutely transformational, could see the potential of it. What we didn't want was just slightly better, slightly faster, slightly quicker things. What we really hoped for was, at minimum, efficiency changes, but what we really wanted to aim for transformational change. So new workflows, new processes, new products, and potentially in some cases, like Claudia's, new types of journalism. So it's AIJC, we saw this as the in-between part between pragmatic and transformational. I'll stop there, and I'll hand over to David to talk a little bit more about the details and set this in context. Would you mind just introducing yourself a little as well?
Sure. I'm David Caswell. I work basically as a consultant in around the area of kind of AI and news. I was most recently with the BBC in the News Labs team at the BBC for the last 5 years, and I've been in kind of automated and computational journalism work since about 2010, originally at Yahoo, and then some time with some publishers in the US. Yeah, I mean, AI and news, we're all excited about it now, but there is about a decade of history to this as it kind of developed. This accelerator, AIJC, we in many ways tried to emulate some of the ways that startup accelerators have been successful. The model for this is the Y Combinator accelerator in Silicon Valley, but there's many others. And some of these same techniques of providing this kind of boot camp of education, some mentoring constantly, every week, getting access to experienced mentors, financing it to the point where all of the expenses are taken care of throughout the project. A lot of deadlines, a lot of fast pace expectations, these kind of things. We ended up with 12 participants. Here's our participant list from east to west: Rappler in the Philippines, Puma Podcast in the Philippines, the Conversation, and not just the Conversation as an organization, but the Conversation's Indonesian branch, your organization based in Amsterdam but serving Iran. We had Daraj in the Middle East. We had Recife 22 in the Middle East. We had Rubrika in Ukraine. Medusa, an exiled Russian news organization based out of Latvia. We had Scrolla Africa, one of the participants, Agência Pública in Brazil, and Cuestión Pública in Colombia, which is Claudia. Claudia will talk more about that later. So a very diverse range of newsrooms. Most of these are small, 15 to 40 people, 15 to 30 people kind of newsrooms. Looking at the collection of participants, there were some large categories of projects here. We'll talk about some specifics. Some were news gathering projects. Some were remediating content, moving content from, for example, text to other forms of content. We'll see some examples. Others were efficiency-based, focused on making newsroom tasks more efficient. Some of the examples that I'll just kind of quickly show here. Here's one from Zamane Media. Their project was Newsletter Hero. And this is an interesting team because they went from essentially zero background in AI, no technical skills, no previous background, literally starting from as basic a position as you could, to doing this in about 4 months. This was a tool called Newsletter Hero, and it's essentially semi-automated their production of newsletters, enabling them to do much more frequent newsletters, much more comprehensive kinds of newsletters. This is what the finished product looked like. Topic-based newsletters, they have a roadmap for this, and other kinds of more advanced newsletter work with one part-time journalist, right? So this is not a whole newsletter production process. This is a tool that lets one part-time journalist have this roadmap for a pretty comprehensive use of newsletters. And then more than just the newsletters, in the process of learning how to do the prompting, the interface, the setup, they've taken that basic familiarity now and they've applied it to summarization as well. So they haven't just got a tool, they've got an ability to work with AI and produce these kind of products. And they did that from a standing start in 4 months with no technical expertise. So that's a real demonstrator of how accessible these are. Agência Pública in Brazil, they basically turned their text output into audio output. They used large language models to write scripts and then had synthetic voices read the scripts. They trained or cloned a synthetic voice based on a reporter personality that they had who had a familiar voice from radio. They have these audio versions of basically everything they produce, and they have a very comprehensive set of guidelines. They're not doing this in a kind of a loose kind of a way. They were really thoughtful about generating guidelines to control and make this, to do this in a way that fit their values, fit their editorial guidelines and so on. Rappler, who was the winner of the project, they have a project called TLDR, which is essentially a whole new brand focused at young people. And so they take the output of their newsroom and they repurpose it with these tools for younger audiences. They have this video thing where they have this kind of broccoli and or candy and broccoli strategy, which is what I call it, where you basically have a lot of content that's very TikTok-y, very entertainment focused, but then every now and again you drop in a serious news story that's in that same kind of format. So you're kind of building an audience on TikTok and other channels, and then you're kind of putting in little bits of serious news into that. They're also using and those videos are templated AI with the translation and everything done in with AI. They're using these tools to generate comics in 4 different languages in the Philippines. So they're taking text articles, turning them into comics. They're summarizing everything they do. If you go on to Rappler's website right now, you can get a summary version of everything they're doing. And again, they had a set of guidelines that were pretty comprehensive. So they're doing this in a thoughtful way. They're aggressive. They're kind of courageous, experimental at some level, but they're not being casual about this. They're thinking through the implications and the risks and managing those risks. And then we have Cuestión Pública and Claudia. Maybe.
Hi, my name is Claudia Baez. I'm the CEO, co-founder of an investigative independent media outlet based in Colombia. With this accelerator program, we create an AI tool to improve our daily covering enriched with investigative journalism context. This allows us, we are a media outlet focuses in investigative journalism, and my journalists deal with to do deep investigation and also covering current events in Colombia with our already investigated information. What is important for an investigative media outlet to cover daily news in a different way? Because that gives us a relevance in the media agenda, the public agenda, because we cannot afford to wait 2 months to publish our investigation, because you are not in the agenda and your audience doesn't have the retentive of your brand and what you're doing. So Cuestión Pública is doing these deep investigations. Meanwhile, we are covering breaking news, current events happening in Colombia. But the point here is that we take advantage of our assets. We only have 6 years of existence, and in 6 years we have a bunch of investigations that have impact, and we have 2 biggest news application, data-driven investigations. One of them is Game of Votes. This is a data-driven investigation regarding the patronage systems in Colombia, complex patronage system in Colombia. We were inspired by Game of Thrones, HBO TV series, and we create a whole universe to explain to citizens regarding presidential and congressional elections 2022, what happened with the power in the local territories, how they hold the power with money and control the territories. And the other news application that we created in these 6 years, it's one called We Know What You Did Last Legislative Period. And this one is an Instagram. We said to our audience, stalk your Congress member. And they can see the assets, the wealth of the Congress members, the network, contractors linked to them. And these 2 main investigations, we collect 4,300 entities, companies, and people in a compiled database. So this is a work for a hard work, 6 years work, okay? So we took advantage of this information that we already done for so many years and tried to connect with current events. These people, these politicians are in the agenda sometimes. For example, Supreme Court starts an investigation to questionary politician in Colombia. So we have this women in our database, in Game of Vote, for example. So we provide the daily news, but enrich it with all the findings, investigative findings, journalist findings that we already know about this person, but it is important that the findings were accordingly with the headline. I mean, Supreme Court investigates this woman for corruption. So that was the problem for us, how we can cover current events and also doing our main job, that is to do investigative journalism. To do investigative journalism, you have to connect the dots, and you are diving in the sea. I mean, you have strong concentration and a lot of time. But if you are covering current events, you lost that concentration, and you waste your time after you cover current events and go again to the investigation, and you have a curve to recover that state of mind, right? So, and I'm the director of the Odin Media. I'm not interested to hire one person only to do current events, because that's not my core. My core is investigative journalism. So with this program, with AIGC, we find a way to just solve the problem with AI tools. So we create an interface. We hire technology agency in Colombia, and they built for us this interface where the journalists write the headline, for example, Supreme Court started investigations to Cielo Génico, and then they look in the whole our databases that were vectorized, and look for this person and weight the findings of Cuestión Pública in another stage, and say, okay, the main finding for Cielo Génico investigated by corruption is this one, and this one. That's what you have in your database, Cuestión Pública. And then they they give a draft. The most important thing here is how Cuestión Pública communicates with its audience. I mean, our voice in social networks is very particular. It's acid, it's sarcastic, it's very pushy. I mean, Cuestión Pública voice in social media has a character. So this is difficult. The most difficult for us was that AI tool could take our voice, speak like we speak in social media. And that was the third stage in Odin. So how Odin is our tool, optimized data integration network, and the most difficult thing that Odin can talk as Cuestión Pública speaks, with our tone of voice, and be accurate in our findings. So we create this interface, and Odin weight the findings that for us is so important, and so the ultimate outcome is this thread in X, and a draft of a thread in X that my editor can edit directly in the application. That is a manual work that before took like 3 hours for a journalist to write the whole thread in X, and right now it's 15 minutes to publish. We think that we can leverage this application because Cuestión Pública has already databases. But what happens if you are an investigative media outlet that doesn't have databases structured as Cuestión Pública? But you have a website, you have all your social media networks, information that maybe are only that social media network. So we are trying to extract all our entities from our webpage and all the information that we already publish in Twitter, X, and Instagram and Facebook, and try to compile a new database with all these entities. And do the same. I mean, this is generation content, automate content generation with AI, and it can take any format. So this is next step for us, just to try to generate this content in different formats. And
A bunch of consultancies for a wide range of newsrooms, and you have a sort of bird's eye view over AI in the industry. I wonder if you could share with us a few observations sort of between large and small.
Yeah, it's really interesting. You know, a lot of large organizations, the BBC is a good example, have had, you know, AI in journalism activity going on for quite some time. But it's a very different kind of AI in journalism. It typically centers around a big data warehouse. It typically has a data science team at its core, a very expensive data science team that's difficult to recruit, data engineers, a lot of technical stuff, and it's and usually focused on kind of large proprietary models, often recommender systems, you know, curating content, but sometimes models like subscription type models or churn models or audience attention models, and very, very big, very slow, you know, kind of like the high priests of data kind of thing. And this new kind of AI that is demonstrated by all of these projects in AIJC is not like that at all. It's it doesn't require much money, you know, subscriptions to services, to UIs and APIs. It doesn't require a lot of technical expertise. You know, the Zamane Media one is a very good example of, you know, starting from scratch and basically by having imagination and enthusiasm and motivation, kind of, you know, fitting the tools to the tasks that are in the newsroom to many, many more people. And so I think, you know, what's happening, I'm speaking in very general terms here, is that agility, the ability to be flexible and make decisions quickly, come up with guidelines in a few weeks rather than, you know, many months, for example, this is giving advantage to smaller newsrooms, you know, to dynamic, scrappy, innovative, entrepreneurial, smaller newsrooms. And some of the big news organizations are a little less agile. They're a little slower. They're overthinking a lot of things. They're being less experimental and more top-down. And so, you know, I think there may be, it's early in all this, but I think there may be a situation developing where smaller newsrooms, and especially smaller newsrooms kind of outside the, you know, you know, the US and the UK and some of the big European countries that are just naturally more scrappy, they're disproportionately advantaged here. And I think that is awesome. I think we may see a situation where we get this, you know, as an industry, we get to learn from the innovation that's happening, or that, you know, I think is increasingly happening right across these, you know, this whole portfolio of small, scrappy newsrooms, which would be that would be a very unexpected development, but very welcome. So.
And so just a couple of questions for you, Claudia. So one, was it difficult to get your newsroom and your team of 18 on board with experimenting in new ways with AI? And if you could tell us did you make any mistakes? And what did you learn from them?
The most difficult thing was to really to define, I mean, we had already the databases, but in like 85 Google Sheets. So it was really, for the technical team, consolidate all these databases, prioritize what is going to be the most important for the AI tool, and also define the voice. I mean, we are using retrieval augmented generation, and this is the most important thing because ChatGPT has already information gathered until some point, but what we are doing is that this model use our own data, and that's another thing. So that's why Cuestión Pública used advanced AI techniques like RAG and fine-tuning. This is the other thing, how this AI can learn how we speak, our tone of voice, sarcasm is very difficult in AI. So, and we are sarcastic in our social media network, so sometimes audience goes so far and says the things that we cannot say, and we have to train Odin to use behavior. And yeah, I think that was the most difficult thing. And our errors, I mean, I think if we have time and the mentoring, because we could have this prototype so fast. We started in August, actually, and we have an implemented tool by November, December. Was so fast because we have this mentoring from David and Bahareh, and we have all this program help us to achieve quickly results. And it's already implemented in Cuestión Pública, and that saved to my journalists too much time. So I don't know, for errors, maybe to spend more time training in the early stage.
Any resistance from your staff about doing this?
No, my team is so embracing technology. We are data investigative journalists, and they love AI. There are no resistance. Maybe the reporter that is on the ground is a little bit like concerned. I will lose my job, but from this direction. I'm from start in 2022 when GPT explodes. I started a channel in our Discord. We have a virtual office, Discord, and there I shared all the AI tools that I find. And from the beginning, my team is familiar with what is happening with AI, because I lead this philosophy of embrace AI from the beginning.
So, Bahareh, you've been studying this as an academic phenomenon for many, many years, and you're involved in a lot of different AI and journalism challenges now. Could you give us a little bit of context of how to situate this project with what you've seen elsewhere, and any other sorts of observations from the longer history of all this? And please also introduce yourself.
All right, okay, thank you. Good morning, my name is Bahareh Heravi. I'm a professor of AI and media at the Institute for People-Centered AI in University of Surrey, which is in the UK just outside of London. I also work as advisor and consultant with various news organizations and media organizations, and also work with the European Commission doing a lot of kind of evaluating and reviewing EU proposals and projects. So that kind of gives me a little bit of an insight, I guess, into how AI is shaping around media and journalism these days. So I'm going to just maybe reflect a little bit on what we've heard today about the projects and how we ran the AIJC challenge, and specifically Claudia's project. As David mentioned, AI is not new in the at all, generally, but also in the news and media. Since 2012, I've been involved in various data and computational journalism projects. Actually, a lot of AI projects were before the data journalism projects, so around 2011, 2012, 2013. There was a lot of what wasn't called AI at that time, but some called it computational journalism that was happening. And I have been involved in a number of projects that were already similar to what Claudia and her team tried to do. It was all about kind of detecting news stories as they were happening, especially from social media, but also a lot around contextualization and archives, because a lot of news organizations, I mean most news organizations or all of them already have rich archives, and a lot of efforts was being put into how can we kind of tag or semantically annotate the archives, so when a journalist is writing a new news article, can kind of without a lot of effort bring in contextual information from the archives. And a lot of money was spent on these types of projects, and I have to say, in quite a few years that I worked with different news organizations and these types of projects, I didn't see a result like we have seen already from Claudia and her team within a matter of 4 months, kind of already pretty much doing it and kind of putting it out there, and even having it automatically kind of as a story in their own voice. So I think we've reached a turning point, even though there is a lot of historical kind of effort in this. We've reached a turning point that, as David again mentioned, we don't have the same kind of budget in the newsrooms. We don't need them. We don't need the same expertise, and we can actually get results very quickly and in a kind of a very tangible way from the effort that we put into the work. So over the years, when I've been working with the journalists, there have been a lot of hesitations and a lot of fear about using AI or computational tools or even data analysis tools. And I think with the likes of ChatGPT, this fear is hopefully fading away, or if it's not fading away, we can help the journalists to kind of deal with this fear and use examples like the projects we have had at AIJC and like the project Claudia has had to show that small newsrooms with very little to no AI expertise can, within a matter of months or even sometimes weeks, create output very, very easily, so people don't need to be fearful of AI and tools anymore. I've been involved in a lot of training initiatives again over the years, and I see this example of a kind of an accelerator with mentoring. So we had a very small mentoring team. It was myself and David, and we were working with the teams, and with a lot of the teams we were meeting on a kind of a weekly basis. And just it was kind of a bit of a nudge. We were not necessarily teaching them anything, even though there was a kind of a initial training period. And it was only a little bit of a, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? What about this? What about that? And I think that was immensely helpful in helping the teams to kind of move along this journey, or at least not be afraid of kind of the type of work they were doing. So again, working with the European Commission these days, I'm seeing a lot of efforts around kind of creating partnerships, creating literacy initiatives, creating education and training. And I'm hoping to see more of these types of accelerator work initiatives, because I think this has been proven as a very, very successful example that I hope we can kind of, we will see more journalists pick up AI and do very interesting projects with.
And Bahareh, what is the sort of typical profile of the newsrooms that apply for the EU challenges and programs?
It is quite wide, because the EU allows for very small news organizations to very large news organizations. So we have from public broadcasters in various European countries to very, very small, agile newsrooms, or even sometimes not newsrooms, but organizations who work closely with the newsrooms. It could be video production, or it could be kind of a AI organizations that come together. So what is with the EU? With the EU, you need to have a group of kind of countries come together. So they are consortium-based. They are a bit heavier than the type of projects we have seen. They need to work together. It is very interesting because there is a lot of organizations coming from kind of smaller European countries, and kind of it gives a really interesting view of how different countries need AI or can use AI within their context and in the collaboration, in collaborative manners.
Yeah, I just want to respond to something that Bahareh just mentioned. Talking about the experience that these newsrooms had as we were mentoring them, going through the sort of the tangible experience. There's an observation that it's a little nuance that I had there that I think Bahareh and I have talked about the true barriers or the difficulties that these newsrooms did have. It wasn't money, it wasn't technical expertise. I think the biggest barrier was a confidence barrier. That these doing this, they could do it. They absolutely could do it. They did it, right? All of them to some degree did it. But also, all of them had to overcome a certain lack of confidence that they could do it early on. And we would see this again and again and again in the teams, where there would be, we're not sure if we can do this, we're not sure if we can do this. And I think a big part of our job was to just get them over that barrier of confidence. And then you could see it. Sometimes it would occur like in a single week, where the teams would go to be a little unsure to being, we can do this. Like developing that sense of control of the tools and sort of understanding of what they were doing. And then once that happened, then their their possibilities and their abilities just exploded. I think Claudia probably had confidence from the beginning, but many of them, it was a month or two into the program, maybe even a little more, before they really got the confidence to go forward. And it was just a confidence barrier. It wasn't a skill barrier. It wasn't an experience barrier. It was just confidence.
There were some hairy and frustrating moments too, right?
There was, but I think that's just inevitable with the newness of this and sort of the new assumptions, but persistence and kind of pushing through that to the point where you feel, I can do this. That made all the difference.
One final point before this is a reflection I think that we haven't captured yet before we open it up to questions. I mentioned right at the top of this hour that we had 115 applications from various news organizations from around the world. A tenth of that, so around 12 or 15, were not actually from newsrooms. They were from groups that self-identified as startups providing civic information. And we think this is important. David, I don't know if you want to speak to some of this phenomenon that's happening in the industry as well.
Yeah, I think the larger thing here is that these tools are obviously not just available to newsrooms; they're available to anybody. And there's different groups. There are some that are kind of commercially motivated, startup, quick buck kind of stuff. But there's also a lot of organizations around journalism, advocacy organizations, policy organizations, and others who also have access to these tools. And there's definitely indications that a lot of journalism-like activity may come from these kinds of organizations. A lot of them actually, in addition to being applicants, I just from personal contact, have also been following what the AIJC projects and the program, and that's something I think we should all keep in mind, because it's very clear that there's opportunities for newsrooms from all this, but you could also see a situation where the overall environment of news might change substantially because new players and new kinds of journalism come into the market. I think Claudia's project with Odin, it's a new kind of journalism in a way. It's basically using data combined with current events to produce sassy kind of voice-intensive journalism very quickly, and you could see that being applied to any kind of data set, which would be a whole new kind of journalism. So I think the ecosystem as a whole is probably going to change as more and more organizations use these tools.
Okay, so we have just over 10 minutes for questions. So lady in the denim, and then chap next to her. Are there microphones, or should we just talk loudly? Microphones are coming.
A question about how are you planning to scale these innovations? Have you any considerations about distributing them all over? Because it's great there are some small newsrooms who get the advantage, but how can many other people have this advantage?
Maybe if we take the other question as well, so that we have grab a few of them.
Yeah, I wanted to ask a question about the example of using someone's voice to make radio, to automatize it. Do we, as journalists, have any sort of guarantees that our voice, I work a lot with radio and it's published online, that my voice will not be used in future to make a product without my consent? Mm-hmm. Is my voice still my property?
Sure. So I think, great, we've got 10 minutes. So Claudia, if you could take the one on scale, and David on the voice.
I think that from this start, that we have already a tool that works, we aims to monetize this tool, but we have to evaluate it because right now it is customized to Cuestión Pública needs, but this is a general need for a media outlet, investigative media outlet overall. I mean, we need this kind of conversion between current events and our archives. to take the most advantage of it, our information. So Cuestión Pública is working in a second stage to do it in different kind of data or information in any platform to consolidate this kind of database, vectorize it as we did it with our own archives, and then train the tool for any newsroom and monetize it. I think this is a really scalable business model, and it's not only for one region. I mean, it's for anyone. So I think it's very scalable.
David, just before I jump in as well, I think on the scale part, one thing is sort of rolling it out to other journalism organizations. The other thing is that the industry really needs investment pipeline, in order to be able to fund and develop these projects from a financing point of view. That's one thing that we really learnt in AIJC. When we did it, the program was not super, like, it was quite early on, and there were a few others like it. Now that we're almost a year after, that there are many programs, there are many training programs that do similar things, but the thing that is missing is the investment pipeline infrastructure for what happens afterwards. Like if Odin were to scale, if other projects were to scale, how do we do that? So that's the thing that we're kind of considering right now and seeking to build.
And on that, I'd keep an eye on Rappler and Rappler's TLDR, that from an audience channel point of view, I think that's the one that's going to scale the soonest. On the audio question, it's a very, I think that's something to worry about. But the companies like 11 Labs, and now soon with OpenAI's voice engine, there's others as well. The companies that enable voice cloning in a mass way, they take this very, very seriously. So, if a person's voice is being cloned without their permission, and if that's being done through these labs, shutting that down is, they are very motivated to do that. I think they're way behind in the mechanisms for allowing that. Like, what do you do? Send them an email. They should have a process for doing that, including recognizing voices. So, I think we're still early in managing people's identity, and not just voices. This works with images, including video as well, right? I think there's a desire in the model, because it is in their interest not to have this stuff used for bad outcomes all over the place. But the problem isn't in the intent; it's in the mechanisms by which we do this. And so, an ideal situation would be you can register your voice and your image and so on in some database somewhere, and then that is just absolutely off limits to all of these models if you're in that registry. Something like that, I think, is what we're going to have to end up with. But how long it's going to take to get there, as anybody's guess. So.
Question from the front. Do you want the mic from? And is there another question at the back of that? Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about the different tools you used in these different newsrooms, from Rappler to Zamana Media?
Sure. There is a report which will detail a lot of this, so we can speak a little bit to that. I just want to collect the other question first before we jump to answering. So between you and... Yeah. Sorry, there was one at the back. Yeah, there she is. Yeah.
Hi. So there's no doubt that AI techniques have made journalists' work much easier. But my question is, I know you're doing a lot of research about this, but the question is, while encouraging media outlets and journalists to implement these techniques, are we actually conducting work or research about how these techniques actually impose risks on journalists themselves and the media outlets themselves and the audience actually, because of how much they can generate misinformation, disinformation, they can create deep fakes, they can actually steal, for example, my biometric data, like my voice, my face, everything. So are we actually, while encouraging those entities to implement them, are we actually how to put it out, mechanisms to protect the audience and the journalists themselves, or ways to prevent being victim of the misusage of AI techniques? Thank you.
Okay, and we'll just collect one more question. I think there was... over here. Right at the front.
Thanks. I'm interested in the process of the 4 months with the small newsroom team. Maybe you can share some experience. Was it the whole team that had to commit to the developing and training and so on, or was it like, okay, there are 2 or 3 guys that do the development and train the others afterwards, and in the meantime the others were still producing news? So how does this work in a small team, this transformational process?
Okay, so we've got less than 3 minutes. David, if you could...
I'll quickly do the...
if you could do tools, risks and safety, Bahareh, if you can do that, and then on the process and team, Claudia.
And I'll do this very quickly. I'm going to plug the excuse me, the report here. So this is the report. It's very comprehensive. It describes the program.
60 pages.
60 pages. Describes the program, describes the projects individually, draws some lessons collectively from all of those projects, and then also has some recommendations for the future. On the tool specifically, I think there's 2 categories to think about here. One is the language models, and the other one is all these other tools like synthetic voices and images and all the rest of it. Language tools are the heart of all of this, the language models. And one thing we observed in each of these projects was the central role of prompting and becoming comfortable in essentially a relationship with the language models. And we saw the sophistication of prompting increase dramatically in team after team after team after team. And so I think that is the main tool. Whatever the language model is, GPT-4 was the main model that these teams use, but now there's Claude 3 and so on. And then there's this other spectrum of tools, which I think there's more choices there, and there's more special cases. Like Agencia Pública used 11 labs because the editing available through 11 labs was very good for the voice characteristics they wanted. But the heart of it is the language models, and especially the prompting of the language models.
All right, thank you. I guess I'll just quickly talk about the risks. It's a very, very good question, which also related to the first question that we had about, is my voice my property? That's true. There's a lot of risks involved in using AI for the journalists, for the news organizations, and for the audience. And there is quite a lot of research going on, especially in the academia and kind of more of a kind of public sector sphere on how they could harm. So you need to follow academia ideally to kind of see what's going on there, but guidelines on the use of AI are very, very, very important. The EU has the AI Act that you could look into, and I think many news organizations are now kind of coming up with their own guidelines based on existing guidelines out there. In terms of the likes of voice, again, guidelines are important, and your voice and your face is absolutely your own property. So literacy comes as equally important, both for the journalists, AI literacy, but also for the public. The public needs to know what is fake, what is not fake, and also whether or not they could use somebody's voice or somebody's picture to kind of create fake or entertaining content that may be harmful. So I'm going to keep it there and kind of move to Claudia.
Okay, we have a team. I'm the tech leader in Cuestión Pública. We hired a technological agency to develop the interface, and we had a consultant, data scientist, that was advised my team in how to do it. The other part of the team, the editorial team, at the end of the training of the AI tool. So they wrote like 100 threads. What should be the voice of Cuestión Pública and the threats, and then we give these examples to Odin to learn how they should to write the threats. So that was 2 stages. One, a few shots, only a few examples, and my editorial team just verify all the information. And the second stage was fine-tuning. So 100 threads wrote by my team to bring it to Odin. That's it.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thanks for coming. See you.
Sure.